Today's episode of The Sit Down with Scott Dion Brown is brought to you by Jeanette McKenzie, Realtor at Forest Hill Signature, and Jewelry Forever at jewelryforever.ca. Enjoy the show.
Broadcasting live from Glenmore Record Studios in Toronto, this is The Sit Down with Scott Dion Brown, your Sunday morning talk show with interesting guests, live musical performances, and the most fun you can fit in your coffee cup. Hosted by Scott Dion Brown and Regine Alaina, this is The Sit Down with Scott Dion Brown.
I don't know how to act. We're back, guys. We're back in studio.
Who are you?
Why are we so
Who
close
are
to
you?
each other?
This is weird. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 184. 184 of The Sit Down with Scott Dion Brown. And this is an incredibly special episode
This is weird.
because we are
Not in pajama bottoms.
not in pajama bottoms. In the studio.
Mm-hmm.
My phone is not silenced.
Are you new?
Now it is. It does kind of feel new.
Oh my god.
Doesn't it feel new?
This is interesting. Well, we're back.
We're back. We're back in studio, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Hello. I am your host, the one, the only, Scott Dion Brown, and I'm joined by the greatest co-host in all the galaxy, the one, the only.
Regine Alaina. Happy Sunday fun day, everyone. I just had to bring it back to that. I had to. It feels right.
It's the tradition. It's the way it was.
Mhm.
Regine, we're back in studio. It feels a little bit
Nostalgic?
nostalgic. It's nice to be back in the space.
Yes, and to all our viewers, you never saw this space. Or the new viewers.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. For everybody, because I started streaming gaming regularly
Mm-hmm,
when the pandemic started, and we had stopped doing the show in person.
mm-hmm.
So now we're back in here. So this is a new experience for all of you guys. Max, how are you? Abigail McIntosh, of course I remember you. Yes, hi, welcome to the show. Welcome, all of you guys. And let's bring in our guest right away. So this is our first episode in person with the two of us.
Mhm.
Our guest is not in person because we're taking baby steps back to the normality of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But our guest today, I'm very excited to talk to.
Me too.
He's a very talented comedian.
Mm-hmm.
And not only is he a comedian, but he's also he's an organizer of comedic events.
So he's an event planner.
Yes, it's a skill set. It's an entirely different skill set, is what I'm trying to say.
You're used to.
Yes, sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm sit-down welcome to the one, the only, Vong Show. Hello.
Hey, what up? What up? Thanks for having me on your show.
Well, hello. Welcome to the show. It's nice to meet you. I know Scott met you. So it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, no, it was.
Yeah,
It
welcome.
was great sharing the stage with you last month, Scott. That was your guitar playing skills are amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, that was great. Thank you for having us. Yeah, so I played guitar for Barry Cito, who was the musical act on your what was the name of the event? The name of the event was
Rice.
It was
Rice,
It was
yes.
Rice Asian Comedy Showcase. Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
I actually have to ask you a question. Actually, let me check YouTube first to make sure everything is running smoothly.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can hear us. Although it looks like the picture's a little bit choppy, but we'll figure that out. It's our first show back, everybody. But I think you guys can hear us well, right?
I don't
think
know.
they can.
It's pause.
Yeah. The audio's playing.
All right. As long as you guys can hear us, that's all that matters.
Yep.
So Vong, I have a question for you. I was on your your Facebook this morning, and I saw you made a comment, or you had like a gig, and you mentioned that you were the fattest person in the room, but then you saw the Filipinos.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying I'm the fattest person in the room right now?
Not all Filipinos, but listen. So it was a gay badminton, and
Mhm.
we all, I'll put it this way. I grew up in a school where it was like 90% Asian. Like we only had one white kid in our whole school. We used to like beat him up every day.
Mm.
So like I'm used to like growing up with like all Asians, and where I grew up, it was like if you're in triple digits, you were considered fat, like flat out, like literally above 99. But that was, that was the school that I grew up in. So definitely, I am way above triple digits right now, and when I'm in normal life, I feel fine. But honestly, going to gay badminton for anybody is gonna make you feel fat. Like if you want to feel bad about your body, go to gay badminton. They have like Olympic levels of body fat.
I am not the room in that gym.
Yeah.
Thanks for the heads up.
I
and for clarifying.
I do say it lovingly. Probably about half of my school growing up is Filipino, so I do love the Filipino community. So I made that joke. So my rule with stand-up comedy is if I'm making fun of a group, I only do it if like they're in the room. And so yeah, I made that joke because that particular show had a lot of Filipinos in the room.
Your fat Filipinos? No, I'm kidding.
Hey, all I gotta say is a lot of my Filipino friends love their spam. So, and that,
that is true. That is true.
So it's looking like the picture is a little bit choppy playing back, which is kind of annoying. But I want to see how it's playing for all of you guys. It is choppy, yeah. But they can hear us. I think the audio is nice and clear. Yeah, the audio is fine. Thomas, welcome to the show. I'm going to my friends to celebrate my birthday, even though it passed. Happy birthday, Thomas. Thank you for being here.
Happy birthday.
And yeah, we are here with comedian Vong Show. I wanted to start even just sort of finding a little bit about how you got into comedy, because I have a lot of respect for stand-up comedians, stand-up comedy specifically. I've heard it said that it's the purest performing art, because it doesn't have you don't have backing tracks. You don't have other things that you can sort of hide behind. It's like it's one person, the audience, and whether you make it or not is all on that one person. And I really like that aspect of it. So I did want to ask, what brought you to comedy, and how did you get started?
Yeah, I'll get into how I started in comedy in just a bit, but I'll actually answer what you said too about how it's like the purest art form. I think it's at least the most vulnerable art form, because like doing comedy, like I've done improv and sketch and different things, and when you're doing that type of performance, you're at least playing a character. So if the audience doesn't like you, you can at least think it's the character. But in stand-up, if they boo you off the stage, like it's you, like it's you talking about your own life. So it is really vulnerable, because you're talking about your life stories. And so if people don't like you, whether it's on stage or online, it's really hard not to take it personal. So it definitely teaches you to grow some thicker skin for sure. Now for stand-up, I got started in a really strange way. So before stand-up comedy, I used to organize human rights conferences when I used to live in Alberta. And I learned two important things. Number one, I would be on stage giving keynote speeches, and it doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether it's something super serious like AIDS or cancer or other things. Like if you're not funny, people will stop listening, even at a human rights conference, because if you're on there for like 75 minutes, you just can't be like dire the whole time. You have to give them some like release of tension. And so I definitely learned that being funny was a good way to hold people's attention. But I also learned that, while human rights conferences are a great way to like meet like-minded people to do projects together and network, it's a horrible way to spread a message, because everybody already agrees with me. Like anybody who's in a human rights conference, like I'm preaching to the converted. So I just kind of started to think, am I actually making a difference just in this echo chamber of everybody who already agrees with my views? So I decided I wanted to spread my message to a broader platform. And having learned that humor was a good vehicle for that, I was like, why don't I translate some of my human rights speeches into stand-up comedy, and then go into unsuspecting small Alberta rural towns and kind of stealthily teach them about human rights, but through humor as the vehicle.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean that's a good point, because at a conference, I guess it's a conference of anything. Yeah, you're whatever the conference is about, you're going to have a person who's kind of already on board with that thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, if you want to reach a broader group of people, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And what do you think? A lot of people do look to comedians as well as kind of like they seem to be able to say the things that your average person can't, right? Do you find that to be the case through that comedy?
I definitely feel
It's,
that way. I know like
yeah.
a lot of comedians recently feel like they can't do that. You know, I would say like half of all Netflix specials by straight white guys right now are complaining about how hard it is to be a comedian, how worried they are to get canceled and they can't say shit. And I was like, honestly, if you feel that way, just quit comedy. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, we can obviously say what we think. For me, I'm never worried about getting canceled, because I was like, you know, because I say what I feel, if you don't like what I'm saying on stage, that's how I feel in real life too. So you probably wouldn't like me in real life. So if you're willing to stand up for what you believe in, and even if people get upset at you for saying it, then just say it, as opposed to doing a whole special about how hard it is to say what you feel. Just say it and face the consequences. Because there's things I've said on stage, you know, like the Filipino joke, or, you know, there's other jokes I've done where, you know, like I do this joke where I say, you know, like I won't apologize for not dating somebody I'm not attracted to. If I wanted to go out with somebody who repulsed me sexually, I would date a girl. And like that gets me into trouble sometimes with like feminist groups, because they say that I'm like, you know, attacking women, saying they're not as beautiful. And I was like, no, I was like, you know, you can be mad at that, but at the heart of that joke, what I'm saying is, as a gay man, I've been told my whole life that who I'm attracted to, I should be ashamed of. And so that joke to me is sort of pushing back, and you know, and you know, it would be like facetious of me to say that like attraction doesn't matter, looks don't matter, because then what am I fighting for being gay? Then I would just be with like a woman, basically. Is so even though people get mad at me for that, I'm like, well, I have a point, so you can still be mad at me, but I believe in what I'm saying. So, you know, that's okay if you don't like it, because I know I have a meaning behind everything I say.
Exactly.
Awesome. Do you also find, I can imagine that again, through laughter, through comedy, you can almost, not only are you going to reach a larger audience because it's in a comedy club, but
Yeah.
I think you can speak to somebody through laughter in a way that maybe it can kind of bring their guard down a little bit, right? And you can almost speak to them more on a more, I don't know, I don't want to say human level, but when, you know what I'm trying to get at? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, like I think, you know, like, yeah, let's put it this way, like comedy in Toronto is different for me, because, you know, like the show you were at was like an all Asian show, and this month I'm doing like an all gay show. But the first 10 years of my career, I was in Alberta, which I was the only Asian comedian on a show for like the first 10 years of my career. I was the only gay comedian. I never performed with another gay comedian for 10 years until I moved to Toronto. So like, I was going into like small town Alberta, you know, this is Alberta. This is like home of the Canadian chapter of the KKK. And it wasn't always like the most receptive crowd, but you know what it is? It's like humor can win people over. And this can sound funny, but even if you're in a room of white supremacists, if you're funny, they will respect you, strangely enough. Like you can actually like translate things. And if you just sort of don't back down, you can actually gain respect from people who might like never see it from your perspective. Like I remember I was doing a show, and it was in like Red Deer, Alberta, and it was a retirement party for oil field workers. So you can just imagine that type of audience. And you know, after this show, this like super butch straight older white guy approached me, and I was like, oh my god, I'm about to get like gay bashed or some shit, right? But no, he actually came up to me and he was like, yo, like nobody's ever made me wish I was gay and Asian before, but you made it sound like super awesome. And yeah, like you just never know how you're gonna relate to people, but humor is a really good way to like break down those barriers, for sure.
everybody laughs, you know?
We did.
Yeah, but I mean, what I mean is everybody, yeah. It's the great unifier. Have you always been somebody who feels comfortable in front of a crowd? Because obviously it takes a lot of courage, I think, to get up on stage in front of people. Has that always been the type of person you are? Or is it something you work towards? Or
You know what? This doesn't sound strange and somewhat egotistical, but you know, I always give this caveat. I can't even pretend to be humble because I'm not, and it takes too many words. But I've pretty much been like paraded on stage since I was like super young. So I grew up in Winnipeg, which is like murder capital of Canada, violent crimes capital of Canada. And, you know, we were war refugees. And I know like in Toronto, when people think of Asians, they think of, you know, like rich Hong Kong kid who's driving
Crazy rich Asians.
Yeah. But that's only like in Toronto and maybe Vancouver and a little bit of Montreal. Because if you have money, that's where you're gonna go as like a rich Asian. But if you go to Winnipeg, that like you're probably a war refugee like me. So and you're probably living in poverty. So when people in Winnipeg think of Asians, at least when I was growing up, they didn't think crazy rich Asian. They thought like gang members. So like a lot of people from my community, which is like specifically the Lao community, they were like really getting into trouble with the law, you know, like really serious crimes like murder types of crimes, and gang violence and such. And ever since I was young, I was just really, really good at school and different things. And my parents put me into like all these different lessons. And I would just keep winning award after award. So literally like I was kind of used as a bit of like a PR move by my community. So literally from the time I was in elementary school, I was getting interviewed by the newspaper for like different achievements I had. And like when politicians would come to town like right before an election, they would like put me on stage with them. And so honestly, I'm kind of used to it. And you know, the funny thing is like when people boast about their success when they're a Westerner, it just, you know, it's usually just from being, you know, a little bit full of themselves and conceited. But, you know, as you both know, as Asians, when you accept your success and you boast about it, what you're actually saying is, I accept the responsibility that my community wants for me. So when I say that I had that success being young, like, I'm not saying it to boast. I'm saying it to say my community needed me for a certain purpose to counteract the bad PR. And I accepted that. And for me to pretend like I wasn't successful or to like diminish my accomplishments is actually shying away from my responsibility to my community. So it's like this weird thing where like if a Westerner kind of hears me talking about my youth, it kind of just sounds like, oh, he's boasting. But, you know, anybody from the Asian community knows like, if you're going to boast like that, then you have to back it up and you have to take the responsibility of what you're doing. And I felt like I had that responsibility ever since I was like in elementary school. And like, so the funny thing is like, literally ever since I was in elementary school, like my friends nicknamed me the chosen one. And like, no, seriously, like, and at first that wasn't like, they weren't saying it to be nice. They were not saying it to be nice. So I think that's where my personality comes from because, you know, like people wanted me to be like ashamed of my success ever since I was young. Like pretty much I was always like the top student in every school I went to. And on top of that, I was in a number of the schools. I was also the sports MVP as well. So it's just sort of like successful in a lot of ways. And so like even some of my friends, they got transferred into my school. This is why they called me the chosen one. Like one of my friends got transferred into my school literally because I was in that school, and they were like, hey, like, you know, my parents have a scrapbook of you of like every single accomplishment you've had.
What?
And they literally forced me to go to your school, and almost every week they're like, you should be more like Vong, be friends with Vong so you could be more like him. And literally that was my life growing up. And so I feel like my personality came out because I was like, I can either wilt from this and be like, you know, like pretend that I don't have the success or like diminish it. Or I could be like, you know, hey, like, okay, I know you kind of hate me because your parents, like, you know, are like changing your life to like have to mirror
forcing you to be me.
Yeah. But I was like, you know, like just because you're not as smart as me doesn't mean we can't be friends. Like if that was the case, I wouldn't have friends with anybody because I basically like the top student in my province. So obviously I can be friends with people who like are dumber than me, because otherwise I'd have no friends. And so that was kind of my way, which is kind of a mean way of putting it, but I felt like I had to be so forceful, because I was like, no, I'm not going to be like that lonely kid in the corner having people hate me because of my success. So very early on, I sort of determined that. And that's probably why I'm so over the top with my personality, because I felt like I've had to defend my success ever since I was young. And which is probably why I'm not really humble about it either, because I'm like, being humble about it is like, like I said, it would be a disservice to my community, and I accepted the responsibility early on, and to diminish myself would not be helpful to anybody.
Fair enough. So so then when did you make the transition from performing to starting to organize and actually put on your own shows, or did you start that kind of at the beginning at the same time, or how did it go?
No. At first, it was just stand-up comedy, and I didn't produce anything at all. And mainly that was because, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder when I first started comedy, because I was like the only Asian or the only gay on a show for the first 10 years, I wanted to be taken seriously. I didn't want people to think I was like the diversity hire, or that I was the token Asian or the token gay. So fortunately for me, I was actually, not surprisingly, also gifted at humor, like everything else. And so I was really good at it. And so at first I just focused on the comedy itself and being as good as I could, because I wanted the respect of the industry. And I actually didn't start producing until maybe 7 years into my career. And, there's a few reasons. One of it was, I started to wonder if I had forgotten like my purpose, like if I'd gone into comedy to spread a social message, and after a while I was like, am I just in this for like the popularity and the interviews and the money and whatever? So I was like, I'm gonna start a nonprofit organization, and it was called Comedy Cares, and we partner comedians and charities to raise money for worthy causes. And I think to date we've raised about like $200,000 for different local charities. And that was when I first started producing, because I wanted to remind myself, I got in this to make a difference in the world. And so Comedy Cares is my way of like bringing it back full circle and using comedy to literally raise money for causes that's important to me. And then more recently, I would say a second part of the answer of why I produce is, earlier on you mentioned it's like a different skill set from performing, which it is, but in a lot of ways, to me, it's like, it's not separate from the art, it's part of my art. And like a perfect example is, I'm not sure if you know this this Houston artist named Mark Rothko. He's got paintings in like the Museum of Modern Art and everything. I wouldn't say he's my favorite artist, but he's the one that does like those weird square shapes and whatever. But anyway, he's like super popular with white people. And
Okay.
That's why.
I was in Houston, and his hometown, and I went to one of his exhibits, and he was so intent to present his artwork in the right way that he didn't just paint the paintings, he designed the building and like hired and trained like the staff, because it wasn't like he doesn't just want you to like take his painting and put it in any old space and that's how you experience it. For him, like the whole experience of coming into the building, walking into the room, like, what's the lighting in the room? Is there skylighting? What are on the other walls? What's the seating like when you're sitting down looking at his painting? And like, for me, it really inspired me. And I think Scott could probably speak to this because you were at my show. Like, for me, it's not just about the stand-up comedy that you're witnessing on the stage, I want from the moment they walk in the room to have like an experience that's different from other comedy shows, so that they're more receptive to the comedy. And for me, it's not a separate thing. To me, as an artist, the experience and your mindset before you hear my stand-up is just as important as the stand-up itself. And so like with my shows, like number one, I would say what makes it stand out from different comedy shows in Toronto is it's like, when the show is at 8:00, like if it starts at 8:05, I'm like upset. I was like, if it's 8:00, it's starting at 8:00. That's a big part of the experience. And most stand-up shows aren't like that. Usually if it starts within 45 minutes of the start time, like you're probably lucky. And we hand out programs so that everybody, it feels like a theatrical experience. We always use music venues. So this time is at the Rivoli, but usually I do it also, at the CBC Glen Gould Studio. We're having shows coming up at Paradise Theater. It's like, because music venues have better sound systems, better lighting, and an elevated stage, better sight lines. And then on the stage itself, we have a backdrop. So I do like all the stage design and the lighting design myself as well, depending on the venue. Rivoli, I don't do lighting design, but like at a larger venue, I'd actually work as like the lighting director / cinematographer. And for me, all of that contributes to the experience of hearing my comedy. So for me, it actually isn't separate from the art. It's making sure the art is presented in the best way possible.
Makes sense. I mean, well, yeah, watching you work, like when I arrived to do sound check, like you were having like a meeting with everybody, and then I saw you, then you brought everybody into the room, and you were okay, we need a camera here, and like you were basically the director, and again, because I wasn't familiar with how the structure of the shows is, I didn't realize that then right after that you then walked on stage and like did a set, to introduce the whole show, and I was like, oh, this guy's
he's a ish.
This guy's doing everything. Yeah. So yeah, it was really cool. And yeah, it definitely did start right on time, which I appreciated. And I think probably everybody there does. But it's cool. I mean, and that's interesting how you describe it, how you say how you don't see it as separate. And that makes sense, because you're basically creating a whole show, and then so even the outside of it is part of it. But I imagine like, I don't think most comedians are like that, because for me it almost feels like the difference between the actor and like the director, right? Like they're related, but not a lot of people can do both, I think.
Yeah, I think, there's been this debate for the last few years about whether stand-up comedy is art. And, so stand-up comedy, we actually don't qualify for arts funding and arts grants and stuff, because it's, for whatever reason, is not considered art in Canada. And for me, my opinion's always been like, some stand-up comedy is art, but like for me, if somebody's a stand-up comedian, but like they sort of just wake up out of bed and get on stage with whatever they're wearing, and they have no intentionality about like how they're presenting themselves, to me that's not art. That's just an open micer. That's like the difference between being a musician and a karaoke person. Like it feels the same, but it's not the same. One is a true artist and would never just walk up on stage without understanding the full experience for the audience, versus somebody who's just like, yeah, give me a microphone. And I definitely get what you're saying, and it's not for all artists that they want to control the whole experience. Like obviously a lot of artists just create their artwork and let people reinterpret it into like their environment, and the environment will reflect on that art. But like I said, then there's people like Mark Rothko and like I said, and myself, where like I want like full control of the whole experience for the person. And I definitely think it's a different type of artist, or a different type of like OCD type of control freak. But I feel like I kind of fall under that for sure.
Very cool. Well, yeah, you're doing some amazing stuff, and I think you're doing a lot of great things for, again, comedians in the Toronto area, as well as, well, I mean, even at the one I was at, there was people from, I think some from New York had traveled in. Wow. So you're definitely contributing to the comedy culture, and you're also doing something, like I said, the producing side of it is you're creating platforms that I think for like comedians who just wouldn't have it otherwise. So pretty spectacular. Pretty spectacular.
And on that note, there are some spectacular people we need to mention.
Oh yeah, we should do our ads, right? Yeah.
Do you even have your script, Scott?
Oh, wait, did I bring it? I think I've got it memorized anyway. But yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. We're about at the halfway point. So yeah, we're gonna do our ad break, ladies and gentlemen. So today's episode of The Sit Down was brought to you by some very, very important people. Now let's see if I have it memorized because I did forget. I knew I'd forget something.
I'm
Regine.
like, where's your paper?
But it's okay, we got it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Toronto real estate market is growing and changing every day. And in these trying times, you need someone in your corner. Jeanette McKenzie, Realtor at Forest Hills Signature. She will go the extra mile to do what needs to be done to find a home that you can feel comfortable about. She's my realtor as well, and she could be yours. Give her a call at 416-523-0408. Jeanette McKenzie, Realtor at Forest Hills Signature. You can also get in touch at JMckenziehomes at gmail.com. That was pretty close. It wasn't exact. It wasn't word for word, but it was pretty close.
That was good.
Jewelry forever. Conveniently located at CF Markville Shopping Centre in Markham, Ontario. They do custom-made jewelry repairs and they change watch batteries, all done on site. Jerry at Jewelry Forever is an absolute artist. If you have a piece of jewelry, a vision for something you'd like created, he is the man to make it custom for you. But he also has a beautiful selection of already manufactured goods that you can pick up right there in store. Follow them. Oh, and we also have a great deal worked out with them, don't we, Regine?
We do. If you go into the store right before Father's Day and let them know that Scott and Regine sent you, you'll get 15% off your entire purchase.
That's right. 15% off, 15%. Head into the store, mention the show, 15% off. Head over to Markville Shopping Center and you can find out more at jewelryforever.ca. Also follow them on TikTok and on Instagram. But TikTok, they post a lot of interesting videos, behind the scenes stuff of jewelry repairs and just things that I didn't know about jewelry. Jewelry Forever, everybody. Check them out. And if you would like to advertise on the show, it's very easy, right, Regine?
It's simple. All you guys have to do is email us at radioshowad, that's radioshow80@gmail.com.
That's right. We do the show live, people, every week. And we do the ads live week to week. What does that mean? It means that you can personalize them week to week. Do you have an event, a sale, something happening at a particular time and particular place? You let us know. We let your potential client base know in real time. It's a great way to build a brand new relationship with a brand new audience. Get in touch, radioshow80 at gmail.com. And we're back.
Literally, we're back.
Yeah, we're back. And it's looking like we are having some technical issues with the video. It's looking like it's pretty frozen, but I believe you guys can all still hear us just fine. Yeah. So apologies for the video, but hey, you know, the audio is the most important thing. And if you're listening on Spotify, you don't even know anything is wrong.
Exactly.
So everything is perfect. So hi, everybody. And if you're just tuning in, we are here with comedian Vong Show. And we've just been talking about what he's been doing.
His journey.
So what are the shows that you're preparing for right now? What's coming up next?
So I've got a show coming up this month on June 22nd. It's called Fruit Queer Comedy Showcase, and it's at the Rivoli. And I'm really excited. It's an all LGBTQ plus lineup. It's starring Robert Watson, who is actually recording his first ever album at this show, and we're recording it with like a multi-camera setup that will then be edited into a comedy special that will release at some point. And on top of that, the three people who are quote unquote opening for him, and it's hard to even call them openers because they're all headliners in their own right, are Martha Chavez and Ted Morris and Al Val. And like literally Martha Chavez and Ted Morris have both won Canadian Comedy Awards on their own. So they are not at all openers. They're two of the biggest comedians in Canada. And I think it just speaks to the respect that they have for Robert Watson that they'd open for him on his album recording. So literally you would never have this many top comedians on a show, but because it's Robert Watson's album recording, they're like paying him the respect to be like, we give you our stamp of approval of like, you're like the next generation and you deserve this spotlight right now. So they're lending their names to the shows, to the show, and they're performing. So as far as stack lineups, like this is like crazy. Yeah. So I'm super proud of this show.
So
yep.
Sorry. So where can people get tickets if they wanted to tune in?
Oh, go to my website. It's vongshow.com. That's like Gong Show, but with a V instead of a G. And all my social media is at Vong Show, which again is like at Gong Show, but with a V instead of a G. And I would say there's a really big show. It's not until September 22nd, but I sort of want to mention it because it's at Paradise Theater, and starting September 22nd, I'm doing a monthly show at Paradise Theater. It's going to be called The Vong Show, and it's kind of my love letter to Toronto, to the Toronto comedy scene, because I want the Toronto comedy scene to see it for its potential the way that I see it. And, the headliner will always be a Toronto-based comedian, because, I want to send a message that we can sell out theaters every month with local talent. Because what happens a lot of times is, I won't mention names, but the biggest festivals in Canada, what they do is they bring in Americans because they don't think Canadians will sell. And then Canadians are barely on the poster. And, when I did this show, when I did this show at CBC Glenn Gould's studio right before the pandemic, we sold out 700 tickets at $75 a ticket with all local talent. And so I'm tired of people saying that like Canadians won't support us unless we move away and become famous in the US. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Canadians will support Canadian talent if you provide them a good show and a good experience. And we proved that at the Glenn Gould studio. But I was like, that's just one time. And like people can say, that's a fluke, it's Chinese New Year, Asians have a lot of money, they're going to come out. But I was like, well, what if they do it monthly? Then is it a fluke, or are other people just being lazy and flying in Americans instead of really, like taking government money and then giving that all to American comedians? Because I was like, you know what? I don't need to fly in Ronnie Cheng because we've got Leonard Chan. I don't need to fly in Ali Wong because we've got Jennifer Shung and Cassie Cow. And, I love those comedians, but to tell you the truth, I feel like Leonard Chan is funnier than Ronnie. And I think Jennifer Shung is funnier than Ali Wong. And like, when you say that to people, like they can tell if you're being genuine. And so when I was doing interviews and I was like hyping up the show and I was like, local talent is worth this much. And we're not just like secondary. Because the reason why I even came up with the price of $75 was for that show was we were going head to head with Hannah Gadsby, who's in town, and I love Hannah Gadsby. Hannah Gadsby was quote unquote the hottest ticket, comedy ticket in town for that day, and so people told me I should discount our price so that we weren't going head to head, and I was like, well, what's she charging? And they were like $70. I was like, well, I'm going to charge $75 because I think we're the better goddamn show. Like, I love her, but we have no backseat to nobody. Do you know how many, like, of the most famous comedians of all time came from Canada, came from Toronto? So, no. There is no, and even, Scott mentioned on my race show that I had some Americans and, with the Paradise Theater shows, eventually I'll bring in Americans, but they're never going to headline because you know what? They can open for us for once because like that's what's up.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So that's sort of the show. Like I want to prove, and like I proved it once, but if I can prove it monthly, I think that'll send like shockwaves through the industry, hopefully for other people to see, don't be lazy, don't take this government money, millions of dollars, and you have all this budget, and like I'm just like a war refugee with like no money, like, and I can sell out these people. Like, come on, like, give me like millions of dollars from like the Canadian government. I'm pretty sure I can also sell out Canadians. Like, like it's just crazy that we don't invest in our own talent. and all the government grants are going to
Mhm.
like international artists when we have so much talent here. So anyway, that's why I wanted to promote September 22nd at Paradise Theatre. You will see the best of Toronto and the best of Canada. And to me, that is the best of the world as well. So
Perfect. So everyone,
I love that.
stay tuned. I know we are staying tuned for it. And happy Pride Month, by the way.
thank you. Thank you.
Happy Pride, everybody. There you go. I love what you're saying. And you know what? A lot of that rings true. Like as a musician as well, I find that Canadian musicians also have the same issue. It's the same thing you were saying, how a lot of times they don't take it seriously until you leave, you go to the US or you get famous somewhere else. And there does seem to be this resistance to supporting like local Canadian talent. And this is something that's always gone back. Like I watch interviews with Rush, which is a band I'm a big fan of. They came up in the the 70s, and people were saying the same thing then as now. And it's like, I remember an interview with Getty at the time. He was like, bands from the US would come to Toronto at the time when they were, playing the clubs and bars there. And they would say, oh, wow, the bands here are really good. They're just as good as, where we're coming from. But there was just this perception that, what they're doing here is we're just doing this little thing here, but the real stuff is happening, over there, you know? And
I would
open your eyes, people. Yeah.
I would say the issue is not the talent. And I think Canada clearly has comedic talent and musical talent. And I think a lot of the times it gets blamed on the audience, which upsets me because, like I said, if you give them a chance, they will support you. And Canadians will support Canadians. So I don't like when people like blame the Canadian audience. I actually honestly think it's like lazy producers because it's just easier. It's like, if I'm producing a show, could I sell it out with like Ronnie Chang or let's say Chris Rock? Like anybody can sell out a show with these people. Like, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't take much, but are you willing to invest in local talent that you believe in? And you're like, these people deserve that spotlight. And especially when it's coming from like Canadian money and arts grants, like I think I don't know. For me, it's personally insulting. I'm probably getting myself in trouble by saying this, but like, it's true. Like, if you're taking Canadian government money, and listen, I get it. Like, a lot of the money is from tourism, which is why it doesn't matter who you put on as long as you can attract tourists and, quote unquote, bigger names from different countries attract more tourists. But some of these grants are coming from like, culture and arts development as well. And they're still going to Americans. And to me, like I said, I don't think it's, like, I think in Canada, we have the talent, we have the venues, like so many gorgeous venues, like Glenn Gould's studio, like Paradise Theatre, like the Rivoli, like go unused, like, different nights of the week, and we can fill those. And to me, the audience as well, Toronto has one of the best audiences in the world. Like, it's why TIFF is so successful, because we're known as like, the most representative audience for the world. If a movie breaks at TIFF, it's going to be successful worldwide because we're so diverse. And I think with our comedy audience, it's the same. Like, we're in the same city as TIFF, so let's not keep insulting our audience. Let's embrace how amazing an audience we have here, and they do support live shows, and they will support local talent. And let's just, like, let's talk to like the producers and the festivals and be like, let's stop being lazy. If we market our local talent and like hype them up and tell people how special they are, people will come. Like, all I had to do to sell out that Rice show at CBC Glenn Gould studio was, I went on TV, I did interviews, and, I didn't say like, oh, come support us because we're diverse and all this stuff. Like, guess what? It's Toronto. Every goddamn comedy show is diverse. Like, it's like nobody's going to spend $75 because you're quote unquote diverse. Everybody is diverse. So what I did was I went on CBC and I said, you know what? I've been doing comedy for like 20 years. This is the first time in my career, the 5 best comedians in all of Canada are all Asian. So we're like, we need to do a show together before y'all get famous and move away. And it sounds like I'm biased because I'm Asian, but I'm like, you know what? I could have done an all gay show. I could have done an all immigrant show. I could have done an all urban show. Like, but no, I didn't think the talent was there. The talent was with the Asians. And I literally thought they're like the 5 best. And like, when you say that, and when you're promoting local talent and you're saying they're that awesome, when people see that interview, they can tell if you're like genuine, if you really believe they're that good, or if you're just trying to sell a show. And I feel like I got the message across that these are like the 5 best like comedians in Canada. You need to come see them. And then also, we, like a lot of shows will sometimes promote and say, oh, this is like an all headliner show, everybody's a headliner. But I was like, there's saying it and then there's proving it. So what I did was 5 shows before at the Rivoli, I booked each of the 5 comedians, and they all headlined a show leading up to the CBC show at Glenn Gould Studio. And so the way and all their shows sold out. So then when I pitched the Glenn Gould Studio show to CBC, I was like, this is like our Avengers team up. Like we had our solo movies and all that sold out. But coming together, this is their team up. We need a bigger venue, and we're about to blow up the box office. And that's how you get people excited. Like, see, I'm not even mentioning I should mention the names of the comedians like Cassie Cow, Jennifer Shung, Ron Jossel, and Leonard Chan. And obviously, I'm super egotistical. So when I said the 5 best comedians, I was part of the lineup. So I am saying one of the 5 best comedians. As you've learned on this interview, I'm not humble, but. Like, even though you've never heard of them or some of them until now, like just me saying that, I feel like, I don't know how you're feeling, but I feel like hopefully I've compelled you to be like, I need to check these people out. And that's how you promote local talent. People will believe you if you say these people are goddamn good. As opposed to just being like, oh yeah, no, it's too hard to promote Leonard Chan. Nobody's heard of him. So I'm just going to fly in Ronnie Cheng. Like, that's lazy. Stop taking government money and then giving it to Americans. I'm sorry. It's ridiculous.
I think you're onto something that it's laziness, because, and it's also, like you said, anybody can sell out a show with a big name, but also it doesn't require talent to, find somebody to know that somebody is good if everybody's already heard of them. You know what I mean? Like, people think Chris Rock, oh well, Chris Rock, yeah, we know he's famous, so I'll just put him on the stage. Whereas it really takes an extra level to actually be able to look at somebody that isn't famous worldwide, but you just have the taste to actually say, yeah, this person's funny. If I put this person on a stage, people are going to laugh, right? But that takes an extra level of skill that's maybe they just don't have, or they just don't want to take the risk, or I don't know what it is, but laziness could be right though. Yeah,
like everybody at that Rice show that you were at, and I feel like the audience came away like super hyped from that show. Like everybody from that show, like none of them were like quote unquote headliners or had a big name, but I believed in them, and I knew if I could put them on a stage with my audience, that my audience would love them. And like my goal for every show, is like, everybody should be so hyped up leaving the show that like it is a bit of a, I grew up in the Winnipeg ghetto, so this is a little bit ghetto, but like literally if somebody doesn't leave the show being like, yo, I gotta call somebody, man, like this was ridiculous, I need to call, like if they're not leaving the show thinking that, then I failed. And if you can do that with somebody who's not a big name, like you said, it's all about the curation side of it. And I will say, I'll give a lot of credit to the music industry, because when I was first starting to produce, I kind of ignored what was happening in comedy, and I just really studied like the most successful indie music bands, because in comedy right now there's no middle ground. There's like either you're Chris Rock or you're nobody. Like there's no like, because in music it's sort of cool to be like, oh yeah, I follow that independent band. Like I've seen people sell out Massey Hall that I've never heard of, because if you have your following, it doesn't matter if everybody knows you.
There's an indie band right here.
Yeah, and so like I was like, but it's not, nobody says like, oh, it's so cool, I follow this totally unknown comedian, you know what I mean? But people will have a following for music. So I was like, how does music do it? So I like really studied how do musicians and independent music producers and artists, how do they sell out like these big venues even though mainstream hasn't heard of them? So I just really learned, how to like do that grassroots building up an audience where it honestly doesn't even matter if the mainstream knows about you, because like, you know what, if you can sell out Massey Hall, does it really matter if anybody knows about you other than your fans? No, because that's that's a career. If you can sell out like 3,000 any city you go in, like, who who cares if the average show knows you?
Well, it's especially because I mean, the mainstream now is almost like, it's almost hard to tell what it is anymore. Like, obviously, sure, it still exists, and you got your major TV networks and all that stuff. But the thing is, the way things have fragmented on with social media and YouTube, and just like, there are people with millions and millions, internationally famous celebrities that have like you don't see them on TV. Your average person who you can build up a following strictly through your social media, and nobody else knows who they are, And so it's kind of it's an exciting time, but it's also very different. So it's I think you're definitely onto something here. You're definitely onto something.
Yeah, and listen, who knows? I might totally fail. Maybe I do these monthly shows and I totally flop. But I believe in the talent here, and I believe in the audience that'll support us. And I might be proven wrong. But I
think you're gonna fail. I don't honestly. Just hearing you speak and hearing how you look at the situation and the way you approach it, I can tell that you see things differently. Like, even the way that you kind of went, oh well, how do indie bands do it? And I don't know if that's something that your average comedian would necessarily think about or think of it to look at it in that way. I just think you're good for our nation, Vong.
Thank you.
Vong for Prime Minister. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe not that far.
I will say you're not the first person to suggest that, but no, I would never do politics.
There you go.
Anyway, not like my head needs to get any bigger, but I'm not sure that's even possible.
Okay, break it down.
Plus, I also think comedians in a way can almost reach more people on a better level than politicians can.
Yeah,
this is really weird. I'm sorry. I'm still not used to seeing Scott in person. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. But no, I really like what you're doing. I think it's awesome. Like I said, I got a little taste of it at the Rice show at the Rivoli. But as I kind of look more into what you're actually building, it feels like you're building something that it'll be the kind of thing. Look, how we just talked about how TIFF is so successful, right? Mm-hmm. But I remember when I was at TIFF last year, they have some of their old posters, and TIFF is something like 40 years old. And when they started TIFF, people said similar things like, "Oh, why is there a film festival in Toronto? Like, what is this isn't London, this isn't New York." You know what I mean? Yeah. And there was this, and suddenly I think people who just went, "Well, wait a minute, perception is everything, right?" And I guess they just had the idea and they had the drive to do it. And I think you're approaching sort of the comedy scene in that same way. And I think you're the guy to do it.
Thank you. And honestly, part of it is me, but I honestly do think it's about the opportunity in Toronto. I don't think I could do this in any other city. Like, there is something special about Toronto, like, just the concentration of talent and the audience support. I think, and like, is it the diversity of the audience? Like, I'll probably get into trouble with some of my friends from LA and New York for saying this, but like, Toronto is so diverse, and because in Canada we embrace, the mosaic type of diversity where we celebrate our differences. And like, when I hear Toronto comedians talk about their heritage or their life, it just comes out in their comedy as opposed to like, banking on stereotypes. And like, honestly, when I'm in New York or LA, like, there's still, honestly, I'm gonna get into so much trouble because I'm literally going to New York next month. But it feels like they're kind of going backward. Like it honestly does. It feels like I'm going back in time, like conversations we had in Toronto like 10 years ago. But Toronto, like, you know, when there's like a level of sophistication in like discussions about diversity in Toronto and different communities that, you know, I just think it's coming across in the comedy because the topics that we explore are like at a much deeper level, you know, than in other cities because, you know, I won't say what city this was, but it was in the US and I was very recently there and I did a showcase with like all Asians. And I'll tell you, half the Asians, like literally in a lineup of 20 Asians, half of them did jokes about how Asians have small penises. And the other half did jokes about how Asians can't drive. And like, this was an Asian showcase for an Asian audience. And I was like, yo, you try this shit in Toronto.
You're yourself.
Exactly. Like if you try that in Toronto, no, like you're not making it out of, like literally my Rice audience would have booed them off the stage. And I think because the audience is so sophisticated, they won't let you get away with that when you're exploring topics about race and integration and culture and diversity, we're just, I don't know, there's just something really special happening here that I don't think could happen anywhere else. And like I said, the venues are gorgeous. If I tried to do a monthly at a theater in New York, it would cost 10 times more for sure. And also, you know, and this is like a good thing or a bad thing about Toronto, but like, you know, if there's one thing I learned about charging $75 on Chinese New Year, all I learned was I didn't charge enough. Because people in Toronto have a lot of money for live shows. I swear to God, we sold out so fast. I was like, clearly I should have just charged more because, like, I live 2 blocks away from Scotiabank Arena, obviously where the Raptors play, and I love the Raptors, but I've seen the Raptors more in Detroit and Cleveland because it costs me less to fly to Detroit, rent a hotel, and I'll still be able to purchase better tickets than literally going 2 blocks down to see the Raptors. Because, you know, this is a dirty secret, but like for promoters in Toronto, do not discount your tickets in Toronto. People here have ridiculous amounts of money.
I love it.
And when Torontonians want to go out for a show, you're not going to win them over with being the cheaper option. Because once you decided to go out, you know what I mean? Like, what's the cost of dinner? What's the cost of the cab? Honestly, by the time you get out to it, like, what's the cost of your wardrobe? By the time you actually factor it in, the actual ticket price is like the cheapest thing. So if you're like, oh,
that's true.
Yeah. So if I'm like, oh, you know, like, don't pay $70 for Hannah Gadsby, I'm only charging $40. Like, no. At that point, Torontonians is like, what is the best goddamn show in the city right now? And you know, you just have to sell yourself as the best and charge appropriately, not being like, oh yeah, we're like, you know, we're your second choice. If Hannah Gadsby sold out, come to us, we're cheaper. Like, no, forget that.
It's true. People don't go out to save money. No. Right? Like you
I mean, you don't want to try, but it doesn't.
If you want to save money, you don't go out. If you're going out, you're